This kick-off session is focusing on efficiency. And efficiency is one of those continuously hot topics, right? Whether you're a general counsel who's under severe cost pressure, whether you've got the procurement department breathing down your neck, whether you've just got a legal operations director who's come on board and trying to drive efficiency, or whether actually you're under no pressure at all, but you just feel under a duty to deliver your services to the business in the most efficient way. So it continues to be a very hot topic, and we're going to explore today some ways and means of trying to drive efficiencies and get better in the way that we deliver legal services to our businesses. Let's just start with a few brief introductions. My name's Matthew. I'm a director at Riverview Law. For those of you that don't know anything about Riverview, very briefly, we're one of the new breed of legal services providers, and large corporations outsource to us on a managed service basis, or indeed we also license our technology to in-house departments to try and help them become more efficient. More importantly, I'm joined by two general counsel here on the panel this morning, David Williams from Tarah Pharmaceuticals and Rob Goldsmith from Wolseley. And in terms of the format, these two chaps are going to each make a brief presentation, and then we're going to develop some of the themes that they raise in their presentations here in the panel, and then we should have time for some questions at the end. If anyone does have any burning questions while we're going through, please do raise your hand, because it would be great to have an interactive and an engaged session so far as we can without interrupting the chat too much. All right, well, with that said, I'll hand over to Rob, who's going to give the first presentation.
Okay, good morning, everyone. As Matthew said, this is a panel discussion, so I'm really keen just to spend a very short amount of time sort of setting the scene on one of the areas in which we at Wolseley are trying to develop a more efficient model. But I think it is useful to give you a bit of background to Wolseley, to our legal function model, and to just one area where we are trying to deliver greater efficiencies. And then hopefully that will elicit some questions and comments and maybe some helpful advice from people in the room who've gone through a similar thing. And also, obviously, with my fellow panelists who are able to sort of strike the conversation and get it going. So just a bit on Wolseley. Our business, we're a trade distributor of plumbing, heating, building, bathroom materials. We operate in about a dozen countries around the world wide, most notably in North America and Europe. Moving on to the legal function, I think if you looked around all our various functions in the business, both at a central level and also down on the ground in the business, we're a pretty decentralized model, and the legal function very much captures that as well. What you've got is in each cluster, we have a general counsel who will head up that legal team, and that general counsel will be responsible for ensuring continued legal support and advice for his or her business and his or her management team. However, certainly in the legal function or legal community, we do look to share a lot of resource, best practice, any innovations, any new technologies that we're bringing out in our own practice areas, so that we can move those across the group and across to our fellow lawyers in different clusters. In particular, I suppose one of the things that my team are responsible for, we do a lot of work on our compliance programs. So a lot of the Wolseley PLC compliance programs on competition law and anti-bribery corruption are done centrally by us at the Wolseley PLC level, and then those are rolled out and implemented and training provided across each of our businesses. And we also look at if there is significant M&A activity, that's also something that we do centrally. So now just moving on to the topic that I wanted to talk about, and it's something that I'm sure is very dear to all our hearts and wallets in this room, is that around legal spend. What we've done, and this is in its infancy. So I'm afraid I'm not coming to this room to deliver a brilliant solution that is absolutely perfect. And I'm sure people in this room will have started this journey a long time ago and be much more sophisticated, be able to use better technology to do what we're trying to do. But I thought it would just be useful to say what we're trying to do, give you some examples, tell you what our objectives are, where we found challenges. So I'm sure Matthew will have lots of questions for me, but if anyone else does at the end, please do sort of keep think of them, keep them to yourselves, and then ask during the discussion time. But what we're looking at is how much we are spending on external lawyers and internal lawyers around the group. And what we've done in this first stage, so we're looking at sort of 12 to 18 months into it, is just actually collating the data. And once we've collated it, and we've collated it centrally, we've then found ways to present it that is useful for the various audiences. I've put on the slide just two charts that we've done just to show some of the metrics that we're trying to collate. So one of them is obviously the aggregate spend. So looking at over a rolling 12-month period, how much are we actually spending on our lawyers in each of our various clusters? And this, we find, is something that the General Counsel in each of the clusters ought to know, as in it's one of the responsibilities and duties of a General Counsel to keep check and manage and control his or her legal spend around the business. But it's also something that centrally it is useful for us to have a grasp of, and certainly the Wolsey PLC General Counsel wants to know how much across the whole board is being spent on legal fees. I've also put there the chart on the balance between internal and external, and this is because our businesses, the legal teams within the businesses, they are designed and they're recruited to deliver a service to that particular business, which may be very different in America than it is in, for instance, Denmark. And so we felt it was a very good comparison, actually, to see how those legal teams and how the legal support is resourced, whether a lot of it's outsourced to third parties and therefore you will have a high spend externally, or whether you recruit more people to be employees of the company and therefore you'll have hopefully a lower external spend, but obviously your payroll and other costs are higher. We've also, so the bottom right chart there, this is one of the other areas we look at, which is actually what are we working on? So what type of advice are we getting in and are we paying for? Is it on corporate work? Is it employment work? Is it litigation? Just to give an idea is actually do we need to alter the way in which we approach our law firms? Do we need to change our panel to be more of a litigation firm? Do we need to recruit an internal employment lawyer because we're spending a lot of money on employment law? So it's those kind of questions that we ask ourselves, having been able to collate this data. And then the final chart I put on there is, and again, this is just a very, very basic metric that we developed, which was each business is very different in size. So is it right to be able to compare legal spend in one country and one business to another? And so we just came up with a very basic, looking at the revenue of that business and seeing where the legal spend was as a percentage of that revenue. And it was quite interesting on this particular chart, just if you can see it from where you're sitting, is that so we've got our biggest business on the far left, which is our US business. And actually, it spends the most, and particular because it's in the US. But when you look at it compared to some of the other businesses, during that period, it has spent actually a lot less per revenue. And that could well be because there is significant litigation or a significant corporate activity in one of the other businesses. But it's just another way of trying to present this data. So finally, I just thought I would set out what we're trying to achieve. As I said at the beginning, we want to improve the collection of this data, which we think is important. Primarily, it needs to be useful for the local team, the local general counsel, the local MD, the local finance director. And interestingly, one of the things that we learned was that people were out there in the business instructing lawyers without the knowledge of the core legal team. So it's actually a really good exercise to get a general counsel to unearth all the various people in his business who were recruiting lawyers that he or she had never heard of for certain bits of activity that may not have needed lawyers. And so there could have been this money that was leaving the business for no real reason. So actually being able to wrap your hands around all of the legal spend was something that's definitely been an achievement during this exercise. As I said, it's also important for the group general counsel to be able to have access to this data across the whole of the worldwide business. And then what we're doing now is we're starting to use the data. So we're starting to see where there are peaks, where there's it looks like a lot of money is being spent on certain areas and categories of work. Why is that? What are the root causes to that? Are we finding ourselves in bigger and longer litigation in some countries because we're selling certain products, because we're selling to certain customers? And it's just enabling us to have those discussions. And then the other great thing that we're doing is by presenting it in this way and having it very open to the various legal teams, we're able to have general counsels and legal teams in each business talking to each other about what they're finding, what action they're taking on those results. And just the outcome really is to, and which is the topic of this session, is to deliver greater efficiencies within our legal model, and ultimately it will be to drive down the costs and just ensure that we are managing our legal spend, we're managing our litigation, we're managing the other duties that we as lawyers have in a much more efficient way. So that's just setting the scene. I'll hand back to Matthew, and then at the end, once David has spoken about his area of efficiency that he wants to share with you, we'll open it up for questions.
Great. Thank you, Rob. Well, David, do you want to take the stage and give your presentation, and then we'll move into the discussion. Thanks very much.
So good morning, everybody. My name is David Williams. I'm General Counsel at Teva Pharmaceuticals for the UK, Ireland and Nordics. And sort of building on what Rob has shared with you, I'm going to share the journey that Teva Pharmaceuticals has been on in developing its operating model as a legal organisation. So just to give you, an overview of, how I'm going to present the journey. I'm going to describe in a little bit more detail who Teva is, so that you understand, the industry sector that we operate in, some of the challenges we have, the type of the organisation we organise. And then I'm going to describe in a bit more detail how Teva has moved to a new operating model, both from a business perspective, but also from the legal perspective, moving from a model which, was rather similar to the model that Rob described for Wolsey, very much devolved and decentralised and locally autonomous, into a much more matrixed organisation, leveraging skills and experiences of different skill sets, different teams to really make maximum impact on the business. And then as a local market counsel, I'm going to talk you through some of the experience of that change at a local level, what we've done at a local level to manage that change, to get buy-in to that change, to help people adapt to the new operating model. And then finally, I'm going to share with you, some of the ways in which we have used technology to achieve that change. So firstly, who is Teva Pharmaceuticals? Well, the clue is in the name. but we're often confused with another company by that name that makes footwear. But just to be clear, we make medicines, we make pharmaceuticals, we don't make shoes. We're an organisation that operates in about 60 markets globally, with 43,000 employees, and our turnover is approximately $20 billion. The headquarters and the origin of the company is Israeli. Started out in Jerusalem in 1901, so it's just over 100 years old now. And its heritage is principally on the generic side of the pharmaceutical industry. As many of you already know, you can sort of clumsily divide the pharmaceutical world into the originator, the ones that develop the products in the first place, that get the patents, and then the generics that come along when the patents expire to make copies and make medicines more available to more people at a more efficient and more costly, on a more costly, cost-effective basis. But recently, Teva has evolved from that generic core into a much more diverse model and is expanded into the specialty arena by acquisition and also by in-licensing and also by developing its own products. So I've listed there some of the companies that Teva has bought over the last few years, some of them more on the generic side, but more recently, looking at Theramex and Cephalon, which is where I came from originally. Those are organizations that were focused on the specialty side of the business. And this drive into the specialty side is one of the key drivers that has really been behind how we've evolved into a matrix operating model. And then just a little bit about the legal function itself. It's large law. There are several hundred lawyers, IP professionals, and compliance professionals operating around the world. So, a fairly large legal organization. So, just one slide to describe and give you a picture of what Teva was a few years ago. And this is really relatively recently. From a business perspective, Teva was, as I said before, very much decentralized. Each business unit, each country management team was largely autonomous. It did its own thing. There was some overview. There was a regional and a global structure, but to a large extent, the business operated, at a locally autonomous basis, and that worked reasonably well. For a business that was principally focused on generics, there's less need for regional and global coordination of assets, skills, and resources. But as you'll see, things have changed. So that business, being highly decentralized, also drove how the legal function was organized. A legal function which was very much aligned to the structure of the business, where each business had its own team of lawyers, a GC, and often, a few other lawyers as well, focused on providing all of the needs of that business, by that one team. But this has changed, for a number of reasons. I mentioned one, the evolution into the specialty space, but also as Teva has sought to harmonize and integrate globally its manufacturing and supply chain footprint, that has also been a key factor in driving the change in the organization. So this is what, in a very basic sense, this is how we've evolved. We've evolved very much to a matrix structure of operating. So each country operating unit has its own GC, has its own team, but added to that, there's a new dimension, if you like, which is the dimension on the left in yellow, well, actually gold, because they're centers of excellence. And the idea is, as many of you who operate already in this matrixed approach, the idea is that you leverage different skill sets, different experience together to make even more impact on decision making, on project management, and business and legal outcomes. So the business is more matrixed, and legal itself is more matrixed. And there's three key parts to that matrix within the legal organisation. There are the Market Legal Counsel, I'm one of them. There are centres of excellence, and there's also a shared service centre. And just delving into a little bit more detail about what that actually means. So really, this new matrixed organisation has really forced the Market Council to think very carefully about, what it is that their role is. What do they contribute to the whole? And really, I think the answer is that, they are the people who really need to know the market. In-depth market knowledge, is key. And for an organisation like our own, which is operating in the healthcare space, it's not just knowing the market, it's knowing how the healthcare system in the particular markets work. And as many of you know, even in Europe itself, with 28 member states, there are, 28 healthcare systems. Some are similar to each other, but really, no two are identical. Not just the healthcare system, but also the local, the legal and the regulatory system. How do you challenge a competitor, for example? In some places, you've got an industry code. In others, the process is very much more driven through the courts. So that's Market Council. Centres of excellence, this is really driven by the nature of the business that we have. And I've listed here, some, but not all, of the centres of excellence that Teva has developed over the years. Patent litigation is probably the first I'd mention. And patent litigation experts have been within Teva for, probably since the time that the organisation was set up. It's key to our business. It's key that we're able to defend our own patents, but it's also key that we're able to challenge others when we wish to bring our own generic products to the market. Market access, which is a term that is used within the industry to describe basically the pricing and reimbursement processes for medicines, the process by which payers, healthcare providers, decide whether they're going to reimburse a product and at what price. That's market access, and that is key. That's one of the most important centres of excellence, I would say. And then finally, what we call global specialty medicines. This is the team that supports the specialty business, and because specialty products really need coordination in terms of the marketing and promotion, the clinical trial development, the post-marketing authorization processes. This needs to be coordinated by people who have that particular skill set. And then finally, just to describe the other evolution that Teva has gone through, this is, evolution into development of a dedicated shared service centre, a team of lawyers who focus on relatively straightforward commercial contracts, not simple, not easy. There's something a bit more than just filling in blanks. But it's contracts which don't really require in-depth local business knowledge. So you could have a lawyer doing that remotely, who doesn't necessarily have a lot of knowledge about the way that the business operates. And of course, the idea behind a shared service centre is that if you have one lawyer doing the same thing, on a repeat basis, you get efficiencies from volume. So turning now to the local perspective, and I just wanted to share with you some of the ways in which some of the challenges I've had, and also the approaches that I've taken to help embed this new matrixed way of working at a local level. There's no doubt about it. I have had to sell the change. People. Not everybody, but many people, particularly, in law, they see change as a threat, and that was certainly the case for me, in managing and selling the change to my team. How do I deal with that? Well, a number of different ways. First of all, you've got to explain and help people understand that, change is necessary. If we don't change, we die. Sometimes you can make the sell by saying that others have done it. If they're doing it, why don't we do it too? But even better than that, sell it by saying, look, we are ahead of the curve. And in some respects, I think, in certain parts of the pharmaceutical industry, we're by no means the first to introduce matrix management, but I think we're probably ahead of some of our peers. Selling the idea that they were now going to be part of a global legal community rather than a small team that was focused on a small set of countries and didn't really interact with people outside of their local team. That was a compelling sell. But also, selling the potential for career development. Whether it's by secondment or short-term assignments, or just project work itself. Getting people working together with their colleagues in other markets, with other specialisms. That helps them learn. I think the other thing to share with you, really, that I wanted to share with you was, some of the challenges that we've had in terms of how to collaborate with these centres of excellence. At first, I think, there was a certain sense that these centres of excellence were going to be a competitor to us. They were going to take our business away. But as time has evolved and as complex projects have come up, which have really shown everybody the value of both the in-market council and the Centre of Excellence teams, it's really reinforced that, we are a partnership together rather than, we shouldn't really be working in competition with each other. It does throw up certain challenges about who leads a project, and it also throws up challenges about, how do you share knowledge, when do you share it, at what level, who should you be sharing knowledge with. I'll move on to that, in a little bit more detail when I come on to the technology side. Just building on the human angle, really, because a lot of change, is very much about how you deal with people. Organisations are run by people, for people. And getting the human side of things right is very important. So, I've put a few gratuitous shots of team building exercises, factory visits, meetings together, and our forthcoming legal congress here in the Netherlands, actually, next week, which for the first time in several years, all of the lawyers around Europe, about 55 to 60 people, will get together and meet each other for the first time. But I think, building on that, it's important that everybody feels that there is a place for them, that they have a role, and it's not been easy. As I said before, some people perceived this change as a threat. They thought their roles were going to be redundant. And, as time has come on and it's been apparent that, there is a role for everybody. Everybody has a contribution to make. There's a value in the particular skill set that you have. That has very much helped, embed this change. And finally, face-to-face time. There's no doubt about it. The more time people spend together, face-to-face is certainly ideal. If not face-to-face, then over the phone. And, if all else fails, by email, but as we all know, be careful what you put in email. It's there forever. And then just a couple of slides really to conclude on, just giving you some flavour of how we've used technology to help drive efficiency. So this is a screenshot from our Legal Europe team room. So it's a portal. It's it's an intranet which we have established here in Europe for all of the lawyers as a knowledge sharing and an information sharing tool. So you can see some of the tabs that we've created. There's a litigation tab, there's a market access tab, there's a global specialty medicines tab. And in there, that's where anybody with access rights can go to download and access information regarding those particular areas. And then a couple of slides to conclude on the Shared Service Centre. So this is the Shared Service Centre portal. This is the one-stop shop for everybody in the business to initiate a request for support through the shared service centre, and this is where we lawyers will go if we want to find out what's going on in the shared service centre, who is supporting our clients in delivering their projects. And this is the this is the form that you as a client fill in when you want to initiate a request. There's a few key details that you fill in, including which country are you coming from, and that is useful in helping me as a GC understand, okay, right, well, what sort of volume, what's the nature of the requests being initiated by my clients into the shared service centre. And then you'll see, a bit lower down, you need to fill in, which part of the world are you coming from. It's sort of a number of regional tabs. But again, that helps drive data, behind the scenes. The shared service centre, obviously, the portal gathers all of this data together, and it creates opportunities for, tracking levels of activity, who's requesting what kind of contracts are being requested. And then I think, finally, that's my final slide. So thanks very much for your attention, and look forward to any questions with my panel colleagues.
Thank you. Thanks, Rob. Thanks, David. Well, I'm sure you'll agree, two interesting and quite different case studies there. And maybe I can just pick up on a couple of themes. And let's go back to you first, Robert, because you kind of hit upon the theme of information, management information, and where you're starting is around spend data. The graphs that you showed there look quite interesting. Is there any software that you use to generate your spend data and help analyse it?
Well, I'm sure there is, but it's not very sophisticated. No, it is purely spreadsheets. So this is, all we're doing is we're asking our businesses to send in their data, and the skill then is in someone in my team who's able to take that data, put it into a spreadsheet, turn it into pivot tables, press a button, and then it comes up with the graphs. And it's and actually we're learning all the time. So I took some of those graphs to a general council conference that we hold once a year, and it's only attended by 8 individuals. But I took some of those graphs, we sort of had an hour session on those, and then it was just based on the feedback that we received from the various people in the room as to what they would find useful. We then sort of said, right, well, let's create a graph on some other things. So and I'm sure there are people in the room who are sort of thinking, wow, there's a product I can sell you. But it is, at the moment, it's just trying to get the data in and trying to find a way to make it useful, actually, for others.
Yeah. You mentioned that you've been capturing this data for a relatively short period of time, Rob, but have you started to see any trends emerging, and how are you looking at the data, and over what time periods are you looking at the data?
So it's definitely... And again, this is based on feedback. We found it was not helpful, or you didn't get the best amount of it wasn't that valuable or helpful to look at it on a quarter by quarter. We look at things on a rolling 12-month because that's the way things like the budget cycle work, and it's not as though we are particularly. We don't spend a whole load of money at certain periods of the year. So that's just one thing. I suppose one of the other things we've learned is definitely given people something to talk about, which is excellent. Not only kind of in from the businesses in centrally, but also around sort of between general councils, who've now got something to actually say, oh, this is interesting. You seem to have a very small amount to spend on employment law. Employment matters. Is that because you have an employment lawyer, or is it just because the system in which you operate is easier to deal with HR issues? So it's been great for learning those things. And it's also just one of those extra bits of data that general councils can use with their management team. So some of our Central European businesses, that's what I'm general counsel to. And we had a new MD of our Austrian business come in. And within his first month or two, I had a meeting with him on a whole variety of things. And one of them was around legal spend, together with the business's litigation book, so i.e. all open litigation. And we were able to look at the two and realise, just picking one example, there was one bit of litigation that had been on the book for a number of months, if not years, and looking at the spend against it, and that this is really simple, so apologies if this is not sophisticated at all, but just looking at the spend and the claim, what are we doing still with this claim on our books? Why are we defending it and racking up some fees on this when actually we just need to make a decision right now? And what it needed, you're not having new MDs come in every 2 years to be able to take a ruthless new look at everything. Now, the reason we were able to take an action on that particular one was because it was a new MD came in and actually wanted to clear out things. But it was the right decision. And what we're hoping here is that by getting the data on how much we're spending, comparing it also with our litigation book, so open litigation, we're able to take more sensible decisions, which ultimately help out the business. So that's our aim in all of this.
Yeah. That's a very powerful example, though, isn't it, of how even basic data and information can be incredibly powerful and lead into asking questions, even if the data doesn't provide you with all of the information that you want. As we were discussing before, it gives you the opportunity to actually discuss and ask questions, which might then lead on to finding the answers and exploring efficiencies. Rob, are you under budget pressure? Is that one of the drivers of the evolution of your legal function?
Definitely under pressure. Yeah, I think it would be wrong to say I wasn't on camera. But no, the whole business. It's especially in the distribution business. You're dealing with fine margins, and so every single cost is scrutinised, and that is us. That is us and our external lawyers. We are a cost. So there is a budget pressure. I mean, interestingly, if you look at the last couple of years, the legal community has actually expanded, and it's been a really good thing. And it's happened in each of our main businesses. It's because the general counsel has taken on a broader role, and the broader role has included certainly kind of being, I suppose, the head of risk or chief risk officer in that business. So taking on what could be considered non-core legal work, such as sort of managing insurance, managing health and safety, and then just managing general enterprise risk. So actually, you'd look at the last few years and you'd say that the amount of budget under the general counsel has probably increased, but that is more because of the expanded role and importance and responsibility that the general counsel has taken on.
And just a follow-up question on that. The amount of your time, approximately speaking, that you spend managing as opposed to lawyering, can you just give us a sense of that? Because we all get the feeling that in order to create efficiency and drive change through and make these type of improvements, you have to invest in management time. You've been doing some basic measurements around that, I think.
Well, we do. I mean, it's one of the outputs of time recording, which is not that popular. But you do get some interesting information, actually. So and again, I mean, it drives that internal spend that we're measuring. So me personally, I mean, it's a pretty small team we've got centrally. There's only 4 of us lawyers, but on the actual sort of management side, it's probably about 12%. But that's actually managing team. You then look at the general management advice that you give at a higher up level, and that's probably an extra 15%. So it's a large chunk of the time, actually, rather than providing core legal services. And it was interesting sort of comparing that with David's model that they're coming to. And I think it sounds like they've still got it, as in because the general counsel is very much still understands the business, understands the people. Because it's that we're trying to do, is we're trying to promote that GC role to really sitting alongside all the other business heads. And that, I suppose, that would come under the sort of management time as well.
Yeah. Just one final question for you, Rob, before we move on to David, which is, how do you see the future, the continued evolution of the legal function at Wolsey? Do you see it changing in terms of the way that you're organised or the way you use technology? What do you foresee or plan for your legal department?
It will definitely evolve, continue to evolve. So there's a feeling in the legal function and across the whole business. You've got to kind of evolve and change and keep it going. I don't know, it's probably a bit of a cliche, but we try and be strategically aligned to what the business is doing. So it was great hearing from David as to the shared service, the shared support team. We have fewer lawyers. We have worldwide, and we've got the same number of employees, 40-odd thousand, but we've probably got 30 lawyers worldwide. And apart from in the US, you don't need that core capability in a certain area. So you've got a lot of generalists. And that's kind of aligned to where our business is. So we're a local business. So we sell very locally, as in within a sort of 10-kilometre radius. We even source our products. Even if they're from very big manufacturers, a lot of the sourcing is done locally as well, rather than across the whole of the globe. There's a lot of European. And so I think unless the model changed where we had global sourcing teams, for instance, it's unlikely that we would go all the way to a matrix model. But who knows? And then certainly with technology, I mean, we are always looking to try and find ways of drive efficiency. And we've done it in a lot of areas where we've found tools that will help us deliver more efficiencies.
Great, thank you. David, can I move on to you? Because change is the key word for you, really, isn't it? And that got me thinking about a few questions. Apart from the organisational change within the business that you described through those acquisitions and so forth, were there any other drivers for changing the structure of the legal function? So, again, cost pressure or any other major drivers over and above organisational change?
Yes, I think as many in the audience will appreciate. The pharmaceutical sector is highly regulated, highly complex. Each stage of the value chain is highly regulated. It's a sector that is under a lot of external scrutiny. Whether you're talking bribery and corruption, or competition law, or the need to really engage with external decision makers, whether it's governments, payers, patient groups, and the like. So a lot of the change was also, I think, reflecting the changing and the changing nature of the environment in which we're operating, the increasing complexity of that environment, and therefore the need for the legal function to adapt, to reinforce and strengthen the skills within the function, so that it's better able to advise the business, guide the business, both on a defensive basis, but also on an opportunistic basis. A lot of what we're trying to do is not just defend the business; it's also trying to secure even better outcomes. For example, in terms of securing good price and reimbursement outcomes. And I don't just mean getting high prices. I mean getting prices that payers are willing and ready to pay because they see the benefits, in terms of health technology outcomes and, the value that a particular treatment will bring. So that certainly, cost, I would say, is important as well. That wasn't really a driver to, the change in the organisational structure, though. We've been under, cost pressure, headcount pressure for some time as well.
There's so many practical questions that flow from this quite significant change you've made. How did you actually do it at the most basic practical level, your general counsel? What kind of help and support did you get, if any, from other parts of the business to help you make this change?
I mean, the change it's an evolution rather than a revolution. It's not, it's not as if, Monday morning, day one, the whole world has changed. Things have evolved. And, if we were sitting here, in 12 months' time, I might be talking about another centre of excellence that had been established, alongside the 8 to 10 that are there already. So evolution rather than revolution. What kind of support did I get? Well, I guess, being part of that European leadership team, being part of a global leadership team, the thinking from, the very senior leaders, the most senior leaders within, the legal function, understanding, the logic and the rationale from their perspective, being part of the decision as well. I mean, it's fair to say that, there have been a number of workshops and, discussion groups. It's been a journey that we've shared rather than, been imposed upon us, I should say.
Yeah. Can you just outline how, if at all, the change in your delivery model there has affected the resourcing within the legal team? I mean, for example, are you continuing to use but just redeploy the same resources that you previously had within these different centres? Or have you had to recruit new teams? Or could you give us a sense of that?
So, I mean, there has been a reskilling, I guess you could say, of the global, of the regional, and of the local, legal teams. 4 years ago, I had a team of, I think it was 5 legal professionals and 2 support staff. It's now 4 and 1. So in a narrow sense, I've got fewer resources that I can call my own. But in a broader sense, I've got a much more broad, and deeper set of skills, experience, and people that I can draw on. But they're not my own, So, I need to use and access that resource carefully because they're not just supporting my markets; they're supporting a much broader geography of markets. So, their time is precious as well.
Yeah. That shared services team is obviously a key part of the remodelling in terms of trying to drive efficiencies. You mentioned there's some types of work that go into the shared services team. How did you decide, and what were the criteria that you used to determine which types of work should go into the shared services centre?
So, start simple and build up from there. So start with, the most basic kind of contracts, non-disclosure agreements, intercompany agreements, supply agreements for certain, finished products. And then I think things are going to evolve from there. I think there's an ambition to grow the shared service centre, globally, probably partnering up with procurement. Procurement as a function is a very large part of Teva. That's a function that has grown, over the last couple of years, and I think that's probably where we'll see the shared service centre really contributing to making a difference.
One more question before we open it up. Any lessons learned so far? Anything you would have done differently? Any advice?
I think constantly communicate. I mean, I think it's the answer for all project management. Particularly in large organisations that are going through any kind of change. Communicate more and often. Even if you've not really got very much to say. But communicate makes people feel they're involved. Actually tap into some ideas that people deeper into the organisation might have. So I think one of the key is to is to make sure that people feel that they are being kept informed and that they are part of the journey rather than it's happening to them.
Great, very interesting, both of you. Thanks very much indeed. Well, Elsa, should we open it up to some questions from the floor? I think we've left 5 or 6 minutes. So please feel free to fire away with any questions that you have.
A very practical question, which I think goes to efficiency, is how do you deal with clients who go to outside counsel without directly coming to the legal departments, especially with the kind of diverse teams that you have that are sort of all over the place? Do you institute a rule that says no legal services except ordered by legal, or is it a apologize afterwards kind of scenario? And obviously that can have a significant factor on your legal costs, which is why I guess I'm asking the question.
To take that one first, Rob.
Well, we don't outlaw it. I think what we like to do is have visibility. So, for instance, where I work which is sort of the group core functions, our HR team, to take a specific example, our HR team, if they're dealing with an internal employee matter, there is no requirement for them to come to us. If it works for them to go directly to a lawyer to help them, and they've got a relationship, and they're fine to do that. I suppose what we like to know is that they're doing it in the most efficient way. And so, there has been a lot of examples of that. So I know one of our cluster of businesses had just one lawyer, and now they've got something like 6. And so that one lawyer was not able to cover 5 different countries. And so a lot of work was going direct to the external law firms. And that's only changed in the last 2 years, 3 years. And so I think it's too early to say we've got all the rules in place that if anyone breaches them, they get punished. But at the moment, it's more, let's find out where people are going direct and trying to manage it. So it's not trying to say that, right, we need to have all control. I don't think we're not going to do like dictators, but we are just trying to understand it, and if there are efficiencies to be had by running it centrally, then we'll do that. So at the moment, to answer your question, no punishment. It's just trying to find out, and if we think we can do better, or we can advise them better, then that's the conversation that we're having.
Just to add to that, I mean, I'm not going to, we have similar challenges to Robert Wolsey, so I'm not going to repeat what Rob said, but just to add, we also don't have a policy. I wish we did. I think a policy would be helpful, actually. In the absence of a policy, I take opportunities to remind, business clients, this is how we like to work, and remind them, when they go out of line that, I did say. But sometimes, actually they can direct you to good lawyers as well, particularly if, you're supporting a business that's 1,000, 2,000 or more miles away. Sometimes they have information and knowledge of the legal market there that you don't necessarily have. I think one final thing I'd say is, I sometimes, I try to make the external legal counsel, ally is the wrong way, but I ask them to say, I would appreciate it if you could tell me, if and when you do receive instructions. It's going to happen from time to time, but at least that's another way of, of finding out what's going on in the market.
Any other questions?
Is that on? I work in the fashion retail business, and I'm trying to drive efficiencies within my department. I think that's where the similarity ends, really. But one of the things that I was interested in is intranet, and the use that a legal department could put an intranet to, because we want to get out there, we want to make sure that people do what we want them to do. We don't want our HR department going direct necessarily, because then they start to run the whole company. But I was a little bit concerned about matters that could leak into the press. If we said, okay, we're litigating, or we've just won this litigation, then the next thing we find is that we're all over the Retail Week. So what is the best use, do you think, of an intranet for a legal department?
We're sort of exploring that as well. I mean, the team room that we've established is, only recently up and running, and we're still discussing, on a team-by-team basis or a subject-by-subject basis, what should be posted there, who should have access to it at the moment. I think we're operating on the basis that everybody within the legal function has access to everything in the team room, so, be aware of that when you're posting materials. I guess, the starting point is be clear who could read materials, who might have access to it, and that really drives, what you decide to put onto the team room. And therefore, of course, certain things which are more sensitive potentially, you're going to have to share in a different way.
Do we have time for one?
Working tools, sorry, because if you wanted to put checklists and things like that for business, so they could use them as working tools for commercial contracts, how far would you go with that tool?
We do that, not through that team room. We do it through, other mechanisms. Yes, but we certainly have, template contracts, with fields that can't be changed. We've got a process which, our policy says, provided you, the business, have stayed, within the parameters, you've only changed and filled in, those bits that you can change, and nothing else, then, so far as we're concerned, it's legally approved. Is it totally watertight? No. Somebody can always present, to the internal signatories a document and say, look, this has been approved by legal. But, it's how you approach risk management, really. I think you've got to trust your business colleagues, or you've got to either trust them or form a view as to what level of risk you're prepared to take, what damage they could do to a business. You wouldn't just put a complex settlement agreement template onto a website and say, right, well, just fill in the blanks. But obviously more straightforward type of contracts, perhaps you take a greater risk for.
Well, I'll tell you what, I've just been given the nod by Elsa that we need to wrap up the session in order to be efficient and on time. Thank you both very much indeed for your insights. Really appreciate it. Thank you.